You're listening to Release Your Resistance with Bex Beltran, episode 63. Welcome to Release Your Resistance. This is Bex. The only reason why any of us don't have what we want in life is because of our own resistance. Right now, I'm learning how to recognize and release my resistance, and this podcast tells you how you can release your resistance so that you can live the exact life that you want. Let's get started. Do you have a topic that just fascinates and entertains and delights you that you could spend hours studying and researching and talking about? I love those kind of topics, and I love finding my own and getting lost in them, and I love noticing other people who are fully competent and confident in their own favorite topics. So today I am sharing a conversation with my friend and astrological advisor, Sheridan. Even if you are not interested in astrology, you will love hearing this conversation because she explains how she developed her interest and mastery and how she uses astrology in her everyday life. Plus, we get off topic a little in a few spots and talk about some fun memories and an endearing, irrational fear. Here's the interview. It looks like we should be recording, and I am so excited to be talking with my friend Sheridan all about astrology. Sheridan, how are you doing?
Thank you so much, Bex. I'm super excited to talk to you about astrology and other fun things today. I'm doing pretty well. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I have been looking forward to this conversation since we talked about doing it, so I am really excited too. Yeah, so just let's get right into it. Okay. I heard part of this story from you before, and I can't remember all the details. So why don't you tell everybody how you got into studying astrology?
Yeah, that's a really fun question. So I have pretty much always been interested in it. I really have to say, since I was like 8 or 9 years old, I remember buying all the astrology books that I could from Barnes & Noble. Up all the way into adulthood, it's continued to be really interesting and fascinating for me because I think it opens a lot into human personality as well as human psyche, if I can say that. And I guess what really actually, if I had to pinpoint a moment that got me interested in astrology, we were in a grocery store checkout line, and I was a kid. And at the grocery store checkout line, they have little they have like knickknacks and magazines and things like that. Yeah. They had this little scroll for each astrological sign. And I remember I was with my family, and they were like, "Oh, you're this so-and-so sign because you're born in January." Well, it was actually the wrong sign. So when I first got interested in it, I was reading all about the sign that I actually am not, but it does coincide with my birthday in January, just different sign. And then that led me to read more, my accurate sun sign, and kind of expand and go from there. So I've been interested in it for a very long time.
Wow. That's so amazing that you gave us that specific moment too, because I was imagining you as a little kid saving up all of your allowance money and going to Barnes & Noble or whatever, and like looking at the shelf and saying, "Oh, I've got that one. I've got that. Oh, I don't have this one yet," and it really made me think like, well, what prompted that? So it was a trip to the grocery store, huh?
It was. Yes. That started it all. And that's funny that you say that, because that's 100% how it was. I would just go with whatever, the allowance money or whatever, and go and be like, "Oh, I have all of these books," and reading them in Barnes & Noble. So yes, the grocery store started it all.
That's amazing. So when you were that 9, 10, 12, 15, however old you were, as you were starting this path for yourself, did you actually like do your chart, like figure it out and like map it out? And I don't even know what any of this terminology, so please correct me if I'm wrong, but like, did you actually do that?
So I actually, what I think is so fun and so interesting, before I even got into mapping out, that would be correct, you're correct.
Oh.
Mapping out or deciphering a natal chart is what we call it. Before I got there, it was so entertaining for me to learn what everything means. So sun signs, breaking down into moon signs, your houses, your planets, everyone, or I shouldn't say everyone, the majority of people probably know their sun sign. But that is one extremely small facet of the whole picture, which the whole picture we would call a natal chart. So before I got to doing and creating and like deciphering natal charts, it was just so fun and fascinating to read about all the different aspects astrologically of a person's personality.
Okay, so I am very, I don't know what the word is, like very separate and very distant from this world, right? So I'm guessing at terminology and guessing at meanings. So in case anyone who's listening is as equally distant as I am from this topic, tell us if you want to in short terms, or just say, no, Bex, people need to do their own research. That's fine too. But just
no.
Tell us, what do you mean? What does it mean when someone says sun sign? What does it mean when someone says moon sign? And what was the third thing you said there? I can't remember, but just give us like a brief 101 of like some common terminology.
Oh, yes. This is the most fun and fascinating part too. And the reason I'm so excited that you asked me to explain this, because what's really cool to me is a lot of people, again, they read their sun sign and they're like, well, that's really generic, or that could be wrong, which, of course, yeah, sure. But there's so much more to it to make up every person's unique personality that people just don't know about. So I love explaining this because it's so fascinating. So there's your sun sign, which most people know. It's determined by when in the year you were born. Most people.
So when people say, "Oh, what's your sign?" they mean sun sign.
Correct.
Okay, got it.
And then probably the next most important placement is the moon sign. So your moon sign is also determined on when you were born. However, moon signs change every 2 to 3 days. So where the average sun sign is about a month, it's about 24 or 23 days. The moon sign shifts into the next sign every 2 or 3 days. So your moon sign is how you feel emotionally. It's how you react to things emotionally. And it's how you feel emotionally secure and safe. So while I'm an Aquarius, by the way, so I have a different moon sign than other Aquariuses, obviously, within that 24-day period. So we all behave differently emotionally.
Yeah.
And then I can go into the other ones too.
Yeah, tell me more.
Okay, awesome. So then you have your ascendant, which goes into houses. So everyone has a sun sign, their moon sign, plus their planets, which I'll get to next.
Okay.
So probably after the sun sign and the moon sign, the next really fun thing for people to look at, and maybe the most important thing after the sun and the moon, is your ascendant, which starts your houses. Everyone has 12 houses, which is determined by the time of day on your birth date. So your ascendant is determined by the hour at which you were born on your birth date, and your ascendant is the mask you wear in public. So when you're uncomfortable, or when you're meeting people for the first time, or if you're in a really public role at work or in a relationship, this is what you wear, quote unquote, when you're meeting people for the first time. It's the persona that you put on.
Okay, backstory here. I just want to tell everyone when we very first met, I think the third time that we spent any time together was when we were working together at a place, and you on my first day of working there, you said, "Oh, when's your birthday?" Because you love this kind of stuff, right? And I was so embarrassed because it just happened to be that day.
I still remember, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, you started a job on your birthday! Like, we have to make it this huge deal."
I was so embarrassed because when I accepted the job and offered what my start date was, it was right around the holiday, and so that's why I didn't start like on a Monday. That's why I started like on a Thursday or Friday or something, and I was like, "Oh, yeah, that's fine. I'll start on that day," not realizing, well, wait, that's Thursday or Friday or whatever day it was my birthday. I forgot about it completely. So.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. I do remember that. I do absolutely remember that.
And I felt a little, like weird, like, why is she asking me my birthday? But then after I got to know you, I realized that's one of the first questions you always ask everyone you meet.
So true. It is. And I just find it fun and interesting because I think, and I can get more into this later, but I think it's super beneficial because I think it really helps communication And I think it really helps building rapport and understanding. In my belief, it's an understanding of maybe certain aspects of a personality or why people take on specific behaviors. So to me, it's always interesting to know because it's like I can be like, oh, well, I know, kind of like you would with a personality assessment test or something at a new job. It's kind of like, oh, well, I know they're this sign with this sign.
Right.
They prefer to be communicated with this way. So that's why I find it so fascinating and helpful.
Yes.
I remember that. That was so
well, funny. So, I mean, it's not weird at all to ask someone their birthday. That's not weird at all. But it would be a little bit weird to say, and what time were you born on that, right? And then you would have to know all the positions and all the planets and everything in your own memory, which I don't doubt that you do, because I know you have like a very, very detail-oriented memory. So it's possible that you do know all that stuff. But do you know like people's ascendants when they say when their birthday is?
No, that's when we get into the actually mapping out their natal chart. So
Okay.
it would take time sitting down and actually like looking at some books for reference. Oh, and there's a lot of really cool online sites too. I like to do it via a book I bought like 15 years ago, but you don't have to have the book. You can just go online and do your natal chart. But the birthdays I know for sure by heart, and I can do the moon sign without the book or the computer because it also just alternates. It just goes through the 12 signs.
Oh, wow. That is so interesting.
It is.
Yeah.
It is really cool. And kind of like I was saying, so I would really, what fascinates me the most is I enjoy reading my horoscope for sure. Like if you go online and you know, your sun sign horoscope, that's all based on your sun sign, by the way, when you know, predictive horoscopes. But for me, the most fascinating and important part is not actually predictive horoscopes, which I do. Like I said, I read them and I find them enjoyable. But it's actually the explanation of human behavior.
Yeah.
Which I find fascinating.
Okay, so now I told you like some of the questions I thought would be fun to talk about on our call today, but I kind of want to jump around a little bit because I agree with you. I think that is fascinating to kind of get a sense of someone's behavior. But do you ever feel the need or the desire to convert anyone to this, or what do you think about that? Because some people are like, no, that's not true.
That's a really good question. So I do not feel any like compulsion to convert anyone else that they have to believe or find it interesting. Normally when people are like, oh, that's not real, or oh, astrology, oh, well, you know, something like dismissive, or they have resistance to it, I'm often like, oh, you're probably just an earth sign or something like that. Like, like, you know, and that's
you're like, I knew that about you. When is your birthday? Yes, I knew that.
Right. Which is, I love earth signs, by the way. That is not a negative.
No, but it's like an explanation of someone who wants to have like the tangible evidence or proof, or how would you describe an earth sign person?
They're very conventional in the sense that if they can see it or feel it, they believe it. They're not, typically earth signs are not very big in the metaphysical or in something doesn't have a practical application. So they're very down to earth, they're very grounded, and they don't find untangible ideas or different things to talk about as interesting, typically. Now, again, people have a sun sign, a moon sign, and planets in 12 houses. So you can have an earth sign that has their placements, all of the other placements are in water, which are super interested in the spiritual and metaphysical, and then that would obviously factor in and kind of shape that for them and kind of influence them.
Yeah. So this kind of gets into the question that I had for you about how does your knowledge and expertise and love of astrology, how does that benefit you today in your life and in your work?
Oh, that's such a good question. So for me, and people can disagree. Again, I am 100% okay when people disagree. And I find it really interesting actually to talk to people who sometimes do disagree. But for me, I find it really helpful in friendships, relationships, colleagues, and understanding the other person. So I find it actually helps communication, it helps relationships, and it helps me meet them where they are. So to me, it's like a mini psychology test. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to ask if you have any examples of that or a made up story that isn't true. Either one.
Yes. So I will say I have two friends that I've met at different points in my life, but one has a lot of really, really active water placements. And then, and when we say active, what I mean is they're exalted or they're important, because some of the farther out planets, which if people are interested, I can explain more, but some of the farther out planets in a chart they don't have as much influence over the human or the personality. So your active or exalted placements are your like sun sign, moon, or ascendant. So she had really exalted water placements. And then I have a friend who has really exalted air placements. And you have to communicate with them extremely differently. Air signs are all about facts, logic, remove the emotion and sympathy or empathy from the equation. It's all just, I want it now, and I want it to be factual, and I don't want any emotions involved in it.
And who would be air? Can you tell us what signs are air?
Oh, totally. So air is Aquarius, Gemini, and Libra.
Okay, so that means if I didn't know anything else about you, I would, if I didn't know your ascendant or moon sign or anything, I would just be like, Sheridan, here's the facts.
Yep.
Not good or bad, just here you go. This is just what you need to know.
Not good or bad, but here you go.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
And I could totally explain other parts of my chart too, which would also influence that communication.
Okay.
And the exchange of facts would be really big for an air sign too. Like they love to communicate and talk.
Okay. And then you said, so you have one friend who's the air sign, and then you had the other friend who's the water sign. And tell us what signs would be water sign.
So water would be Pisces, Cancer, and Scorpio.
Oh, so I'm a water sign then.
Yes,
okay.
Yes, you are a water sign.
And what do we like, or how do we get communicated with?
My particular friend that I'm talking about, and this is a Pisces, which is a little different than a Cancer. Sure. But to use her within the water realm, water also enjoys facts to be delivered to them. Like they want to stay grounded, obviously, metaphor, water wants to be grounded. Their water signs can be prone to hyperbole or specifically Pisces. Again, I love Pisces. They're an amazing sign. Hyperbole or overreaction or giving over sentimental, or it takes them longer to work through those emotions.
Okay.
If they're given news or information in a way that wasn't presented to them in a way that they wish to be communicated. So there's more emotion, there's a need of security, grounding again, and information needs to be delivered to them in a different way than an air, fire, or earth sign.
It makes sense. If I can kind of assume some things about this relationship, like it means that when you're talking to your Pisces friend and she starts to freak out for something, you don't have to freak out to be like, oh my God, why is she freaking out? You can just be like, of course, my sweet Pisces.
Right.
You just take all the time you need to work through these emotions, and then we'll just come back together again.
Exactly.
And then, so that helps you kind of
be there for her or talk to her.
Yeah, I see that. It's very interesting. Yeah.
And so I really like that too in colleague relationships. Personal romantic relationships, I think, is huge. And then at friendships, I think it's really interesting. And again, there's a lot of aspects to a natal chart, which lends to different parts of someone's personality. And even though there's the umbrella of water or air, a Pisces and a Cancer are very different. An Aquarius and a Gemini are very different, but they share grouped similarities.
That makes sense. Yeah, that's cool.
What's cool too, also off of that, is that you have your elements. There's 4, and the signs are grouped underneath: earth, air, fire, and water. And then within each element, you have fixalities. So you'll have your fixed signs, which are more stubborn, your cardinal signs, which are a little bit more, they take charge, they initiate things, they're leaders. And then you have your mutable signs, which are more they seek harmony and balance. They're communicators, they're mediators, and they're social. So within each element, you have different fixalities.
Wow. So this is actually a lot more complex than like you described, like, oh yeah, reading a daily horoscope is interesting,
Right.
My first exposure to astrology was when I was at a dinner party when I was a teenager, and I was a guest of a nephew of the dinner party. And so it was all adults, the people that I didn't know. And so I looked across the little space and there was a bookshelf, and I was just kind of noticing the bookshelf. And so Linda Goodman's sun sign was on the bookshelf, right? And so I just pulled it out because everyone around me was just talking about adult things that I didn't care about. And here was this book, and I got interested in it.
And it really did draw me in because I, of course, flipped to my own and I read it and I was like, oh, this is all accurate. And then I read my friends and, oh, wow, this is accurate for you too,
Oh,
you know?
awesome.
And so then later I asked for and received that book as a gift and I took it to work and everyone would like gather around me. I'd be like, okay, when's your birthday? And I would like read it. And then we would all like be like, yeah, yeah. No, well, that's not really.
Oh,
But
I
then
love that.
that's as far as I got. So now that I'm hearing you talk about it, either I don't recall or it didn't get that far in depth in Linda Goodman's sun signs, but there's a lot more to it, right?
Right. Which I have to say, I absolutely love that book. I actually have like 3 copies for some reason, but I think I've gotten them as gifts and other things. But I absolutely love her book, the Sun Signs book, and it's huge. It's like thousands of pages. But I think she does a fantastic job at describing sun signs, and that would have been one of the formative first books I read at 8 or 9 years old that really opened this door for me. I absolutely loved that book.
Oh, I'll have to look and see if I still have my copy of it. I kind of doubt it because I've really gotten rid of a lot of books over the years, but that would be fun if I still had that one because that was kind of my initial. And I do remember feeling like so interested in it because of that book.
Yeah, no, she did a great job. And I love the way just her writing's awesome. And I love the way she explains. I think she does a tiny bit of explaining a moon sign, but she has a separate book all on moon signs.
Yeah, that was the other thing I remembered when I was trying to figure out which book to ask for. I was like, well, I already kind of flipped through sun signs, so maybe I should get moon signs. Like I had no idea what was the difference or why I would want one or the other. Like, aren't they basically just the same? And so the answer to that question is
no. Well, they're similar. It's cool because your moon sign is just another shade of your sun sign. So like there's multiple Aquariuses, but if we all have different moons, we'll act a little differently from one another.
Sure.
Linda has this analogy that I absolutely love, which I think is super helpful for people who are interested in learning more or getting into it. And they're like, what's a moon sign? What's a sun sign? There's so much. I love how she says, okay, your sun sign could be that you're from the United States, but your moon sign would be that you are a blonde woman from the United States. But then your ascendant is you're a blonde woman from Texas within the United States. So it's like, or California, or like she has this great analogy where she like breaks it down like, oh yes, most people from the US may have things in common. Okay, women, we may have certain things in common in comparison. A person from Texas is going to behave different, maybe, than a person from another part of the country, maybe. So then she kind of breaks it down and it's a really cool analogy Linda gave us in her book.
Nice. That makes so much sense. When I think about it that way, I think, well, yeah, of course, if I talk to someone from the East Coast compared to someone from the West Coast, I am going to expect a different rate of speech, a different tolerance for things, working or not working, or a different expectation of rapidness. I don't know what that word is, but there's like different expectations based on where someone's from. So I love that analogy as well. Then kind of different understanding or expectations based on when someone was born and also where they were born, right? Or does that matter with astrology?
It does. Oh. So the moon sign changes every 2 to 3 days. So depending on where you are born and your time zone, the moon could have already passed into the next sign versus the 12 hours beforehand or the day beforehand. So where you are born also matters for your ascendant and your moon sign.
Yeah.
So it's awesome.
So what if someone has been thinking about this for a while or has noticed astrology in general and now is maybe hearing this conversation and thinking, okay, well, I did want to learn, but now it sounds kind of like overwhelming or maybe difficult. Like what would you offer as far as overcoming any resistance to learning, even if they wanted to or are curious about it?
Yeah. No, I think just start with the sun signs and start with the moon signs, break it down so you're not learning about everything all at once, one little bit at a time. And it's super fascinating. And I think start with your own because then it's the most interesting, or your spouse or, your family or friends or whomever. Start with people that that you can apply like, oh yes, I see the Aquarius in that, or, I think that makes it more interesting when you have a real life application for reinforcement. So, and then you can expand and learn about all the other things. But you definitely start with the sun sign or a moon sign. And I think it just expands from there. And I'd be totally happy to talk to anyone about it.
That would be amazing. So if someone's sitting there going, okay, well, I'm curious, but I need to latch on to someone's energy and enthusiasm. You definitely have a lot of energy and enthusiasm about it. So you would talk to them about it.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I'd love to. And I can share my Instagram handle. It's very easy.
Okay.
It's my first name, which is Sheridan _ my last name, which is Capriseca. So it's literally just my first and last name with the dash in between, an underscore in between.
Okay, perfect. And I agree. I do think it is very easy because it is just your first and last name. Super easy. But I imagine someone's like, oh, what did she just say right now? So if you didn't catch it audibly, for anyone who wants to contact Sheridan, I will also have that posted in the show notes for this episode too. So
awesome.
And we can repeat it again at the end, just in case anyone's driving or walking and they're not ready to write down this new name that they've never heard before.
Right. No, that's a really good point. Really good point.
If someone is interested in learning astrology, what do you think? I mean, we both just talked about Linda Goodman, but for me, that was many years ago. So there's been a lot of, upgrades in information and technology and everything. So what would you say is a good first step for someone today if they want to start learning?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I do still think Linda is a tried and true classic. It's really fun to read her in her aspects of it and her descriptions. My experience has been, if you want to learn about the placements, the descriptions, and other people who fit that in your life, and maybe you want to start learning how to do some natal charts yourself, purchase books or just Google online the actual signs and placements themselves. I think it's very common and popular to buy predictive astrology books, which is awesome. Major things happening in 2021 or 2022. Barnes & Noble has a lot of those, and they're great books and they're fun, but they don't spend as much time explaining the different aspects of placements and the signs themselves. So in my opinion, they haven't been as helpful. Now, that's not to say other people wouldn't find them helpful, but that would be my advice of where to start.
Yeah, one thing what I think I'm hearing you say is like for your personal enjoyment and interest, you more like to use astrology to think about psychology and interpersonal behavior and communication. Although the other side of it exists as well, like predictive. And one thing that I really like is when someone who is in the astrology someone who studies it and understands it, makes like this little introduction, like at the beginning of a conversation or sometimes in a meeting or something, and they'll say something like, oh, well, it's no wonder because, and I'm not going to say the right thing, but they'll be like, it's no wonder because, Pluto is in retrograde and blah, blah. And it's like, and then it just I'm like, oh, I did not know that. But thank you for that explanation of why everyone is grouchy, or, thank you for that explanation of why I tripped and stubbed my toe when I walked in. Like, okay, it makes me feel a little better, to think maybe it was planetarily influenced, not just.
Oh, totally.
Yeah. So do you use any of that, or do you think about that? Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Well, Mercury retrograde is, as I think a lot of people have heard about or learned about, Mercury retrograde is a real thing. It definitely causes very hectic, crazy days. So yes, I am very aware when Mercury is retrograde or if there is a full moon. I think full moons are also extremely good to watch. And what's so interesting about that is the notion of watching for full moons and, observing extreme or enhanced behavior is way pre anyone writing astrology books. Like there's evidence and there's writings and there's stuff like that of like ancient civilizations watching for the full moon because there's increased violence, there's increased accidents. Animals often give birth around a full moon. There's all kinds of anyone writing an astrology book. Ancient civilizations were watching for the full moon.
Yes. So I kind of, maybe this is just me making this up, but I kind of feel like even if there's people out there who are like, nah, astrology, nah, I don't think so. But you say, well, full moon, and they're like, oh, well, I believe in that.
Totally. And I think that's so interesting, isn't it? But absolutely. And what's so, like, again, when you get down to the predictive, I 100% believe in like Mercury retrograde, your Saturn return, and full moons because they affect us all. I love reading my daily Aquarius horoscope, but then again, I'm only Aquarius in one place. Then I have all these other planets and houses, so you have to take those daily horoscopes maybe with a grain of salt, but they're still fun and there's still truth in them, I feel.
Yeah.
But Mercury retrograde, full moons, those astrological and planetary happenings affect everybody, all signs.
Yes. So I remember the first time that I ever heard the phrase, because again, I'm pretty distant from this topic. I don't know much about it, but I was listening to a podcast and I heard someone talking about their Saturn return. And I came to you and I was like, Sheridan, have you ever heard of a Saturn return?
Yes.
And you're like, oh, yes.
Would love to write a book on Saturn returns. I think they're one of the most powerful and important aspects everyone goes through. So
just give us a quick definition. What do we mean when we say Saturn return?
Okay, so breaking it down, Saturn is everyone's planet of, it's a tower year. You're coming to terms. You're gonna go through some life lessons. Saturn is a lesson giver. So your Saturn return is always 28 years apart because that's when Saturn goes through a cycle. So it's 28 and then 56, whatever 28 plus 28 is, and so forth. And then you've done a full soul cycle. Your Saturn has gone through every sign. It takes 28 years for Saturn to get through all the signs because it's a slow moving planet. And basically, it's like when your cell, like every 7 years, you get new cells or something in your body. Basically, it's like your Saturn slate is being wiped clean. It is normally whatever aspect of your life it falls in is going to have some heavy responsibility with it, but it's only for the reason of its shining light of where you need to grow and cut excess so that we can all be the best that we can be. So
does it happen for everyone in their 28th year?
Yep, it's everyone. Obviously everyone turns 28 at different years.
Hopefully.
But it's when you turn 28 that is your Saturn return, and then it happens again 28 years later.
Got it. So what I could do, since I'm a little bit past 28, is I could look back at my 28th year and kind of notice how Saturn return showed up for me. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. Yes,
okay.
Absolutely.
And then if someone is going to be turning 28 coming up here pretty soon, they might just kind of mentally prepare themselves and accept, or if I'm about to turn 56 or something, I could just be like, hey, there's some planetary stuff about to happen. I don't need to worry. I just need to be open, aware, open for lessons, ready to experience change, growth, whatever it might be.
Yep. And normally, like if you're reading astrology blogs or books, Saturn is painted very negatively. Like it's the mean planet, but it's really not. Actually, it's one of my favorite planets because you are cutting away and you're learning lessons so that you can be the best form of yourself and you can grow. And you come out of it like a shiny penny. Like, you know,
it's so sweet, right? Yeah.
Right. So, but if people are getting interested in astrology for the first time, they're going to be like, oh my gosh, this is a horrible event and Saturn is something to be concerned about. It is not at all. It is one of the most powerful moments, I do think, most interesting, but I don't think it's bad. But that is something definitely fun to read about over time. Like I wouldn't recommend anyone starting to.
Okay. So that would be like level 202 or 303, not 101.
Right.
Okay, good to know. Yeah.
It's super fun. It's super interesting.
And you said if you were going to write a book, you would write it about Saturn return. What would the thesis of your book be?
Oh my gosh, it would be in just Saturn in general, because Saturn also does some interesting, fun things, not just your return. But it does some interesting. Okay, when I think of Saturn, this may sound cheesy, but when I think of Saturn, it's like reemergence.
Oh, that doesn't sound cheesy. Yeah,
exactly.
Sounds like a renaissance, right?
Yeah, oh, that's perfect. That's the perfect word. It's your renaissance.
Oh, I like that.
So I love, that's what I said. If I could write a book on astrology, I would focus on Saturn because I find it so fascinating.
That is, I am fascinated now. Like before I was like, well, I don't really get it. It's very confusing. It's a lot of terminology. And now I'm like, but what? But tell me. Like, I want to know more. And I wished I would have known about my Saturn return before, but I guess I have another one coming up. So I guess I can look for it and be prepared for it.
True. And like I said, and I could talk about this forever. So I know that there's like a time limit, and I don't want to just go on and on and on. But I could talk about this forever. Saturn doesn't only just go through your return, which is when it returns to the sign that Saturn was in when you were born. It can also go through your sun sign. Like it can go through your Venus sign, which is how you love. And so then Saturn shines a light on your romantic relationships for a few years.
And you can map that all out too?
Yes.
That is interesting, right? So that if someone is having, like, I know plenty of people who are like, I just want to meet someone. I just want to, they're having trouble dating, or they don't want to date, but they want to have a partner or whatever. So astrology could actually help them realize if Saturn is on their Venus or whatever, like, this is what's happening right now. Just be open and aware and look out for this.
Absolutely. And you know what's so perfect? It's so perfect for the title of your podcast, because I feel like with Saturn, it's obviously teaching you hard lessons, and it's just, shining the light in some places you don't want to be shined. So our human thing to do is to resist, and you cannot resist Saturn. You have to release that resistance.
That is perfect. I love that. Is so interesting. And I loved a minute ago, and I was just kind of gonna let it pass, but I did have an episode last year about how I learned tarot as a skeptic, and you just mentioned a tarot card when you were talking about Saturn return. You talked about it's like the Tower year. Yes. And that's the same. So like, I don't know anything about astrology. I wouldn't be able to like pick up on little like comments and jokes. If people like made little aside comments, I wouldn't know what they were talking about. But when someone says something about, oh, it's just she's going through her Tower year, I totally know what that means, because I recognize the meaning of the Tower card. And many, just like you were saying about Saturn, many people who aren't like intimately aware of tarot, when they see the Tower card, they are very fearful, because it feels like, oh no, it's destruction, it's breaking everything down. But just like you said about the shiny, I was about to say shiny pillow. No, it's a shiny, a shiny penny. Like, yeah, everything breaks down. You're hit by lightning, your bolts of thunder or whatever, right. And the tower crumbles to its foundation so that now you can build again.
Right.
Yeah.
No, and I love that too, because I was actually thinking of the Tower tarot card when I said that. So that's so funny. That's I with that saying, it's your Tower year. Saturn kind of acts a little bit like that.
Wow. Okay. Is there anything else you think people should know, or do you want to share anything else that I didn't ask about as far as astrology goes?
Oh, no. Yeah. Like I said, I love talking about this. So if anyone is interested in talking about this some more, or they would like more explanation of how things break down, or the different things that are included in a natal chart, I would love to talk about it.
Okay, and I'll give a plug too. I should have looked at it before we got on our call, but you did my natal chart for me and last summer, and it was very interesting to read it, and you did each of all the different aspects. So you were like, in this area this, and in this area that, and I was like, oh my goodness, it's so fascinating. It's so interesting. So thank you. Yeah,
absolutely.
I'm going to go back and look at it again, because now I have a renewed interest. So yeah, I definitely encourage anyone who's curious, if they want to take Sheridan up on the offer, just to have a fun, interesting chat, to reach out on Instagram and set something up. Let me ask you, if you let me, a few fun personal questions. What do you think about that?
Oh, of course. Yeah, that sounds fun.
All right. Just doesn't have to be about astrology, but it could be if it is. So what would you say, how would you describe your dream life?
Oh, that's such a good question. So for me, my dream life would be something where I love to travel, which fits into my moon in Sagittarius, to tie that into astrology. Mm-hmm. So I love to travel, and my dream life is finding fulfilling work that I'm really passionate about, that also allows me the flexibility to take time to travel. Because, sometimes work can get a little crazy, which is expected and as is. But for me, my dream life would be to, find fulfilling work that allows me to travel to lots of really cool, interesting places. And like I said, that kind of ties into one of my astrological placements.
That's interesting. Yeah. Okay, cool. What's your favorite advice that you've ever given or heard from someone else?
Oh, that is okay, so I have multiple. I would not say I'm the best advice giver, so I'm not.
Okay.
But received. Bex, you're an amazing advice. You give fantastic advice and insight. But my favorite advice received, well, there's two. Water seeks its own level, which basically just means it's kind of like if everything's okay in the end. If it's not okay, it's not the end. But basically, you'll have really high highs in life. You'll probably have some lows. You'll go through ups and downs. Nothing ever stays the same. Change is constant. But water always wants to seek its own level. So if you have a really bad chapter, you'll probably come out with a good chapter, and vice versa. It's all about going through the different chapters in life.
Okay, that is good advice. Yeah.
And then my other one is, I'm going to butcher it, but it is the quote by Theodore Roosevelt, like the man in the arena.
I love that one. Yes. Yeah.
Courage is the man in the arena, not the people making fun of him or chastising him that are not in the arena. You know, that kind of the effect of that.
At least for me, the famous part of it is the part about daring greatly.
Oh, yes.
Because that, you know, Brene Brown, that's the title of her book too, right? So
good. Absolutely. I love that advice.
Ah, so nice. What about, do you have a pet peeve or maybe an irrational fear that you want to share publicly?
I can't think of a pet peeve off the top of my head. I'm sure I've got them, but I can't think of them. Some irrational fears that I have. I have many an irrational fear.
And you don't have to say them out loud if you don't want to. I just thought that would be kind of an interesting question.
Okay, I will share one that's a little embarrassing, but it's interesting. It is irrational and weird, and I will say I think it's unique. When I first saw the movie Jurassic Park, I was absolutely terrified by raptors. But genuinely, I thought they could drive cars. I thought they could follow you home. I thought that they could show up genuinely, I had a phobia thinking raptors could be in our day-to-day life.
Wow. Yeah. I do think that's unique because, I mean, I don't think raptors are current, right? So,
no.
Okay, so that was why it was like irrational because they don't exist in our current universe that we know of. Okay.
Well, and I will say that's a phobia that I've really worked through, and I no longer feel those fears, and I can watch Jurassic Park just fine. Great movie. So I will say that was a very irrational fear that I had once upon a time. That's kind of funny.
Yeah.
And a little,
It's very endearing. Yeah. I like it. What about, do you have a secret or obvious, doesn't have to be a secret, talent?
Ooh. I don't know the answer to that question. Well, you've told me I have a really good memory, but I don't know if that counts as a talent.
I mean, not that we want to compare people to other people, but compared to other people, in my opinion, your memory is just like amazing. I am always in awe of the details that you, like, even just going back to the conversation that we were talking about earlier, how you frequently ask people their birthdays, and then you remember everyone's birthday. Like, oh, remember that guy that we met at that bus stop 2 years ago? Yes, his birthday was September 12th, and like.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. So I would pick that as my talent. So thank you. And it's so funny, before I met you, I had never, that would have never crossed my mind. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, well, and thank you for that mention, because just for all of us in the entire world, we probably need a good reminder that we cannot see sometimes our own talents because to us, they're just normal. It's just normal. And we don't even think it's different or special or unique or anything. But as soon as someone else comes along and they're like intrigued by it or impressed by it, and they tell us, so that's another thing. We can all tell each other what intrigues and impresses us about other people, right? Because then we can realize like, oh, wow, that is kind of cool that I have that skill, or I enjoy that, or I'm good at that, or I'm crazy talented in that area, or whatever it might be.
Oh, no, I totally agree. And like I said, I can genuinely and honestly say you give the absolute best insight and advice. There have been multiple times I've come to you for coaching or assistance or just insight, and you're just amazing.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I so appreciate that. And now I think on those perfect ending notes, we can wrap up our conversation.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed talking with you. This was so much fun. I hope, if anyone has any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. I'd love to connect. So thank you so much again, Bex. I love your podcast.
Thank you. Thank you, Sheridan. It's been so fun to talk with you.
Thank you, Sheridan, for that delightful conversation. It was so fun and also informative and interesting. And, dear listener, if you want to connect with Sheridan, just reach out to her on Instagram at her Instagram handle, which is at Sheridan_Capriseca. I will spell it. SHERIDAN_CAPRISECA. Or you can always email me at hi@bexby.org or leave a comment on the show notes for this episode at bexby.org/moon, MOON, and I will put you in touch. And you'll also be able to find her Instagram handle there at the show notes. Thank you for listening. Talk with you next week. Bye-bye. This has been Release Your Resistance. Thank you for listening. If you like this podcast, make sure you're subscribed and leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Also, think about someone who you know who would love this episode and share it with them. There should be a share button on your app if you're listening to this on your phone. If you'd like to continue this conversation one-on-one or in real time, come visit me on my site at bexby.org to see how we can work together.